Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. It was a very wet start to the day for some. That rain is pulling away from eastern areas, and for most, it's a fine afternoon out there. The heavy rain overnight was caused by Storm Connell, named by the Dutch Weather Service because it's going to bring them some very strong winds and heavy rain in the coming hours. But the rain is now clearing for us. Still a bit damp over parts of Yorkshire, Lincolnshire, down into Norfolk. That rain edging away by sunset. For many, it's dry and fine. Some sunny spells across Scotland and Northern Ireland and Wales as well. Just a few showers coming into the far north. Staying quite cloudy across much of southern and eastern England, but as I said, at least that overnight rain is pulling through. Chilly feel out there, particularly with the winds along these North Sea coast, where we'll continue to feed a few showers in, and temperatures not actually getting above freezing for much of the day over the highlands of Scotland, and soon through this evening dipping back below freezing. A few showers coming into the far north. Fog has been a problem across Northern Ireland, and that will thicken up once more through this evening. So do watch out for that. We're also going to see later in the night some fog forming over parts of England and Wales. But for many, it's a fine evening here with clear skies. We are going to see those temperatures tumbling. Still a few showers just coming into the extreme east of England and the far northeast of Scotland, but most will have a dry night. The fog thickening across Northern Ireland and then forming over parts of East Wales, the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast. And quite dense patches of fog are likely, so that could be a problem, particularly for tomorrow morning's rush hour, and we'll see a fairly extensive frost forming as well. So it's a cold start. That fog is going to be dense, should clear from Northern Ireland through the morning as the breeze picks up, but for parts of the Midlands and eastern England, that fog may well linger for a good chunk of the day. Further west, we'll see thickening cloud, a bit of rain coming into Northern Ireland, a few showers for Wales and the southwest, but again, many places dry, but a cold day, particularly if that fog sticks around.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on...
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss my big opinion. Mark meets and my take at 10. Democracy is a funny old thing. And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here
We do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Wednesday, the 27th of November. I'm Miriam Cates.
And I'm Tom Harwood. A convicted terrorist who groomed the Manchester Arena bomber, Salman Abedi, has been freed from prison, despite a parole board saying they fear he will reoffend. Is this in the best interest of the British public?
And Keir Starmer has faced demands from not one, but two of his MPs at Prime Minister's questions to introduce blasphemy law, including banning desecration of holy books. The Prime Minister sidestepped the issue.
From Russia with drones? Could flying objects spotted over Air Force bases in the United Kingdom really be part of a sinister plot by Vladimir Putin? All eyes look eastwards as cabinet ministers are banned from Russia and questions are asked about a series of strange events across the country.
Well, welcome to Good Afternoon Britain. And interesting PMQs there because, as we said in the headlines, two MPs asking for potentially punishments for desecrating, ruining holy books such as the Quran.
Yeah, really interesting there because I seem to think that we had something called the Enlightenment in this country where we learnt that it's OK to criticise religions, where we learnt that it's OK, it's legal to be a heretic, where we learnt that it's all right and perhaps even advisable to be able to not only give out but also receive criticism, that we all become better people if we are able to criticise and receive criticism in turn. What sort of a country would we be if we start to ban that?
Well, I think that's such a good point, and freedom of religion is one of the things that marks the UK out as a free country. And of course, it is offensive to go around burning the holy books of other religions. Of course it is, and sometimes people would mean it to be offensive, but it certainly doesn't mean it should be illegal. And once you start down that route, it's a very rapid path to curbing incredibly important freedoms. And actually, there is a link between this and the kind of non-crime hate incident row that we've been having over the last few weeks. If you start to legislate for offence, you're very, very quickly in tricky waters.
Absolutely. And what I find most extraordinary is, I mean, thank goodness the Prime Minister didn't say, yes, we're going to ban the burning of books, or we're going to ban the desecration. Because what does desecration mean? I mean, there was a case in I think it was the East Midlands where someone scuffled a Quran ever so slightly, and there was ambiguity as to whether this was deliberate or not. But some schoolboy didn't treat this holy book with the reverence that some parents thought that he must, and therefore he had to sort of be paraded out with press conferences and apologies, and it was sort of like something you'd see in the Middle Ages, a sort of
and I think
show trial.
We've got to be honest, this is a particular issue with Islam. I'm a Christian, I don't want anyone to burn the Bible, but I certainly wouldn't retaliate or take offence if somebody did it. But it does seem to be very different rules in Islam, and we do need to make sure we uphold free speech.
And I do wonder if it was a conservative Christian who stood up and said, shall we have laws about desecrating the Holy Bible? Would the Prime Minister have just sideswept the issue, or would he have stood there and made a full-throttled defence of liberal freedoms, of free speech and of the Enlightenment?
Well, we'll never know. Anyway, much more of that coming up. But first of all, your headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you from the newsroom at 4 minutes past 1. And the top story this lunchtime, well, making everything worse. That was the charge from Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch, accusing Sir Keir Starmer of dodging the Chancellor's pledge not to raise taxes or to borrow more in the future. In a fiery exchange at Prime Minister's questions earlier, Sir Keir Starmer hit back, though, saying the leader of the opposition wanted all of the benefits of the budget without explaining how she'd pay for it.
2 weeks ago, she stood there and said that she wanted all the investment, all the benefits of the budget, but she didn't know how she was going to pay for it. I noticed that, having come here criticising the national insurance rises over and over again, on Monday she admitted that she wouldn't reverse the position that we set out. Meanwhile, her science minister was saying he was going energetically to do the opposite. They really haven't got a clue what they're doing.
In response to those roars from the Labour benches, Kemi Badenoch suggested Sir Keir Starmer should resign over what she described as Labour's lies.
If he wants to know what Conservatives would do, he should resign and find out. Until then, I'm the one asking the questions. There's a petition out there, 2 million people asking him to go. He's the one who doesn't know. He's the one who doesn't know how things work. It is not government that creates growth, Mr. Speaker. It is business.
Roads and railways across the country have been hit by flooding today and various train stations evacuated as Storm Connell struck. In London, King's Cross Station was forced to shut due to overcrowding, with commuters describing absolute mayhem at the station. Trains have also been unable to stop at platforms at Euston Underground Station due to overcrowding. Meanwhile, the tube network's also been plagued by fire alerts, causing issues on a number of lines. Paddington Station was among those forced to close earlier as TfL responded to one of those fire alerts. 6 people have been arrested in London as part of a counter-terrorism investigation into suspected activity linked to the Kurdistan Workers' Party, also known as PKK. That is a proscribed terrorist organisation. The suspects, aged between 23 and 62, were detained under the Terrorism Act, with officers conducting searches at 8 different addresses across the city, including the Kurdish Community Centre in Haringey. Police there say there is no immediate threat to the public, but the centre will remain closed for up to 2 weeks as their investigation continues. In the Middle East, Israel has now, for the second time since a ceasefire with Hezbollah came into force, has said its troops have fired shots in southern Lebanon. That comes as thousands of displaced residents in the south are currently returning home after 14 months of fighting. But Israel is warning people not to return until its forces have fully withdrawn from certain areas, which they say could take up to 2 months. Here, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, says the ceasefire is long overdue, calling for a political solution to end the crisis permanently. Meanwhile, aid organisations are calling for the truce to extend to Gaza, where fighting continues. 3 former Conservative Prime Ministers, Boris Johnson, Theresa May and Liz Truss, have come out against the assisted dying bill ahead of Friday's vote in the Commons. Opposition is also growing, with more than 1,000 Anglican clergy warning the legislation is, they say, a dangerous threat to society. The cross-party so-called wrecking amendment could see the bill scrapped before it even reaches a vote. Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer, who once supported changing the law, is yet to reveal how he will vote. NHS dental services are in crisis, according to a new report, with treatment levels still millions short of pre-pandemic numbers. The National Audit Office says the government's dental recovery plan, aiming for 1.5 million extra treatments this year, is unlikely to meet that target. Even if it does, that's still a 2.6 million fewer treatments annually than before COVID. Critics, including MPs and the British Dental Association, say that measures like mobile vans and dentist bonuses have failed to improve access to dental care. Parents in England will soon be benefiting from 30 minutes of free childcare at the start of the school day as the government rolls out breakfast clubs. Applications are now open for 750 primary schools to join a £7 million trial with free breakfasts and childcare starting in April. The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has pledged to triple funding for the scheme to over £30 million by next year, calling it a landmark opportunity to improve attendance, improve behaviour and support families. Well, Under-Secretary for Education Stephen Morgan spoke to us earlier here on Breakfast, and he said that the scheme will break down the barriers to opportunity.
Free breakfast clubs in every primary school in the country, I believe, will make a big difference. We know that it's good for behaviour, it's good for attainment, and it's good for attendance as well. And it also will provide parents' choices around childcare. And we want to do this because we know it will make a big difference to children's lives and make sure that they succeed at school.
And TV presenter Davina McCall has announced on social media that she is stronger and stronger every day. That's after her surgery to remove a benign brain tumour. Posting to Instagram earlier this morning, she credited sleep with aiding her recovery and improving short-term memory, which should have been affected by that operation. Davina, who has a bruised eye from that procedure, says she's being cared for brilliantly by her husband and her stepmum, and that she's now focusing on rest, and says even a short nap is leaving her feeling renewed and refreshed. And all the very best from us here at GB News to Davina. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. Now, though, it's back to Miriam and Tom.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is now 10 minutes past 1, and the Home Office has told GB News it has robust measures in place to manage the risk, yes, manage the risk posed by terrorist offenders who've been released from prison.
Well, this follows the news that convicted terrorist believed to have groomed the Manchester Arena bomber has been freed from jail despite serious concerns that he'll reoffend. Adal Rauf Abdallah was released yesterday, less than 2 months after the parole board denied him early release, claiming that he still posed a high risk of serious harm to the public.
Well, joining us now is our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, can the Home Office be confident in any way at all they can, quote-unquote, manage the risk of this convicted terrorist?
Well, very publicly they're saying that, don't worry, we will be able to manage the risk. But the truth is, there is a very significant issue that's now manifesting, which is Al-Qaeda-era terrorists who were jailed for very long periods of time, given life sentences of 20 years or so, but in 2004, and, you know, many of them are being released now. And add to that ISIS-era terrorists, so those who tried to get out to join ISIS in Syria or Iraq, those who were out there and came back, others who were facilitating them were jailed, but they are being released now as well. And all of these people, to a greater or lesser degree, will pose a potential risk and have to be monitored. Now, this man, Adal Rauf Abdallah, was jailed in 2016 for facilitating and encouraging others to go out to join up with ISIS in Syria. He was denied parole just a couple of months ago by the parole board after an assessment that was carried out by the prison service, psychologists and the parole board, and that ascertained and came to the conclusion that he still posed a significant risk of reoffending, a risk to the public that was not a risk they were prepared to live with. So his parole was denied. However, that very lengthy jail term, I say very lengthy, 9-ish years in total, has now come to an end, and there's nothing that they can do about it, the authorities. He has to be released, albeit with measures, and that's what the government means. They've got sort of control order type measures that they can look to here that, depending on the potential risk, will be greater or lesser. I'm thinking of electronic tags, restrictions on internet use, just obviously alerting the authorities about changes of address and things like that. But that doesn't necessarily give them 24-hour surveillance and control of these people. And they can't have 24-hour surveillance on them all because there are just too many of them.
Exactly. Now, one of the things that's quite concerning is the parole board's role in here, because the parole board actually has quite a good record. I think it says on their website that of all those prisoners that they say are safe to be released, there's only a 7% serious reoffending rate. Now, you might say that's still too high, but it's actually quite good considering the kind of prisoners that you're talking about. The worrying thing in this case is the parole board actually still believe he is a risk to the public, yet he's still being released because he's come to the end of his term. So what would actually have to happen to extend the terms of prisoners who are in for terrorist-related issues, or is that just not possible under our legal system?
It's not possible because if a judge sets the sentence, the minimum term that someone has to... Well, if the judge sets a minimum term, then after that, of course, the parole board can decide. But when there's a maximum sentence that's laid down by the judge, as in this case, once you've reached your maximum term in jail, you will have to be released. There's nothing that can be done about it. Now, this 7% reoffending rate, it doesn't sound that bad, and it sounds quite good when you compare it to recidivism in other sectors of crime. But the big difference here is that other sectors of crime are, you know, going off and committing a robbery or a burglary or something like that. That kind of reoffending, you know, is not good, but people can live with it. The kind of reoffending that these individuals can be involved in is going off and blowing themselves up, or stabbing multiple people, or running them over in a vehicle, or, in the case of Abdul Rauf Abdallah, encouraging other people perhaps to go off and do that. And the significance there is that he was mentioned in the official inquiry into the Manchester Arena bombing because he was a childhood friend of the bomber Salman Abedi, and Salman Abedi had visited him during his time in prison, and the report into the Manchester Arena bombing said that it was very likely that this man had radicalised the Manchester Arena bomber.
I mean, the extraordinary thing of that 7% statistic is that for every 20 terrorists you release, at least one will go on to commit a terrorism offence again.
But just to be clear, that 7% statistic, it's all the prisoners that they assess each year. So it's 25,000. So this is not all terrorists. This is all the prisoners that come before the parole board. So that 7% includes all of them, not just terrorists. So just to be clear, it's not saying 7% of terrorists reoffend. No, 7% of all prisoners that come before the parole board, who will mostly be in for different offences.
But of course, as Mark says, the resourcing isn't there to make sure that all of these people can be tracked and watched, for want of a better word, 24/7. It raises questions of whether these sentences were long enough in the first place.
Absolutely.
Well, Mark White, thank you very much indeed for joining us for that. Joining us now is the former prison inmate, Ads Khan. Ads, do you get the sense that there is a significant reoffending issue with this country?
Oh, definitely. Firstly, thank you very much for having me on, and good afternoon to you both. Yeah, I'll have to agree. Look, public safety is, well, it has to be a priority. And the issue with reoffending that we have is that there aren't sufficient resources available within the prisons. You can't rehabilitate somebody through iron doors. In terms of a lot of prisoners, actually, they've got 20-hour bang-up or 18-hour bang-up, so they're behind the doors 18 hours a day. Now, how are you going to rehabilitate that? Well, how is rehabilitation going to take place in them kind of circumstances? The issue we've got is that we've got more prisoners than we have prison spaces. And look, I'm a big believer of reform and rehabilitation. I do a lot of work in prisons. I speak to thousands of prisoners every few months. This case is a wake-up call that we need improved systems, we need better rehabilitation programs, and we need better post-release monitoring for all this to work. And it's like a business. I mean, the more money you take out of the business, sooner or later the business is going to go bankrupt. The prison system and crime is exactly the same. If we want to rehabilitate people and get people on the straight and narrow and avoid the catastrophes that we see on the streets and in our lives and now in concerts and in arenas, then rehabilitation must start, and it must be focused within the prison system.
Now, Ads, I'm sure many people would agree with you that the prison system is under-resourced, there aren't enough places, and perhaps not enough effort is, as you're saying, made to rehabilitate people. But is there not a difference between people who are in prison for, say, drugs offences, gang offences, robbery, which are, of course, terrible crimes, but there may have been reasons leading up to them that you could expect that someone, if they're given a job, if they're given a stable home life, might not reoffend? Is there not a difference between that kind of offence and someone who is in prison for terrorist offences, who is ideologically committed to mass murder or to grooming other terrorists? Can those people ever be rehabilitated?
No, it's a very valid point that you raised there, Miriam. I mean, I believe in reform and rehabilitation, but I'm also a realist as well, and I do believe in public safety. I believe in second chances for those who are willing to take accountability and change and make amends, and trust must be earned, you see. For offenders who still hold extremist views, their priority must be ensuring they no longer pose a threat before considering release.
Yeah, Ads, from your experience in prison, do you get the sense that sometimes prison can be, to some extent, counterproductive? Because we know that many people can almost become radicalised within prison. We know that there are preachers who operate in prisons, and sometimes the safest place to be is with a sort of gang or a group, and very often that's ideological.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I think one of the advantages that I took is that I never got involved with any gangs. And it's funny that they say your network is your net worth, and I made sure I actually chose the best of a bad bunch, so to speak. And it's funny that because the people that I used to not knock about with, but spend time with, we've all done quite well in our lives. You know, we've all got businesses, and the people that messed around, it's like anywhere, you know, the people that cause trouble generally always knock about with other people that cause trouble. The people that are really successful tend to hang around together. I'm sure you guys also knock about together outside the studio, and you're doing a fantastic job, by the way. But yeah, but it's all comes down to choice, I suppose. It's if you want to change, and change can occur in an instant if you're willing to flip the switch.
Well, Ads, thank you very much. Very insightful, and all the best, and well done on turning your life around, and a great business by the sound of it. That's Ads Khan there, former inmate. Yeah, I mean, it is a really good point, isn't it? That there are some prisoners who absolutely, with the right intervention and the right chances outside prison, can make a fresh start. Yeah,
and I think that there are also those, frankly, who can't.
Absolutely,
and it's the blooming tricky job of parole boards and everyone else of finding the grey area, and it is just a binary line that has to be drawn.
And I think terrorism is a very particular, special offence, which I personally think probably should qualify for not to be released without parole or something like that in the first instance, because it is a completely different type of offence to opportunism or violent crime that people can get into incrementally, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think there's also a big line between violent crime and non-violent crime. I mean, if you've done a bit of tax fraud, should you really be locked up? Whereas if you've gone around stabbing people, probably
well,
yes.
You should be punished, but you're not a danger to the public.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's a different kind of offence.
In my view, prison, the primary purpose of prison is simply to keep the public safe from people that would do them harm.
Well, it should be a deterrent as well. But if you're not sent into prison until your 121st offence has been found out, it's not much of a deterrent, is it?
Oh, goodness me. Well, in other news, Keir Starmer was challenged at PMQs about the potential job losses caused by Vauxhall owner Stellantis, saying it would close its van-making plant. We're on the ground there at the plant after this very short break.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
My next guest knew George Carman rather intimately. Indeed, he immediately asked her for her hand in marriage when they first met. Karen Phillips knew Carman from 1986 and was a close friend until his death in 2001. Karen has used court transcripts and personal documents to construct her new book, Get Carman. There it is. And here you are. Karen, thank you very much indeed. So you knew him very well, and actually he began to write a little bit of an autobiography just in the weeks before his death. And from those pages, I was struck by the amount of uncertainty that there was about the man. This man who was so confident in court, who charmed juries so famously, but in some ways felt that he was an actor, in some ways felt that he was fighting back nerves and uncertainties. Is that true?
I think he was quite worried about every case. It was much more that he was concerned for the client. He always wanted to do his best. He worked so hard to win a case, not really for his personal satisfaction, but because he didn't want to let people down.
His success rate was extraordinary, and, you know, I'll choose my words carefully here, but shall we say that many people were surprised at the time that Jeremy Thorpe was found not guilty. It was astonishing in the case of Jonathan Aitken, for example, that the principal charge against him, which was that he'd been corrupt in arms dealings, I don't think that was ever actually reached during the court. It seems even more surprising today that people who were employed by Mohammed Fayed were believed in the case of Neil Hamilton. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, his results are extraordinary.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 25 minutes past 1, and the government has announced it will review electric vehicle sales targets following Vauxhall's announcement to close its van-making factory in Luton, which is putting over 1,000 jobs at risk.
Yeah, this all comes just days after Ford announced plans to cut 800 further jobs. But Chancellor Rachel Reeves says she wants to protect British businesses.
We're committed to the 2030 target for phasing out the purchase of new petrol and diesel cars. But it is really important within that to make sure that we get the balance right and a proper support for the automotive sector, for the car industry in Britain. We've just launched a consultation to look at the plans that we inherited from the previous government, which would have meant fines for businesses that didn't sell a proportion of electric vehicles, because we want to keep investment, we want to keep jobs in Britain, and that's why we're launching this consultation.
The Chancellor seen there in a redecorated Treasury.
Well, let's cross over to Luton now, as GB News reporter Adam Cherry is outside the Vauxhall factory in Luton. Adam, what's the mood like there following this announcement?
Well, the mood is one of shock and disbelief, as you might well imagine. This plant has been open for 120 years. It's essentially the bedrock of the economy here in Luton. It's not just the jobs, it's the families and the community around it. And I've been speaking to local people here to understand how they feel about it, and as you'd expect, they're not happy. So earlier today.
It's always a massive part of Luton, and if this is the last 1,100 jobs to go, you know, it's a bit of a death knell for the town, I think. It's not great.
You know, to buy an electric car, you need to take out a mortgage, don't you? And not everyone is going to do it.
My husband worked there for years, and it's everyone you know is somebody that has actually worked there. So it is going to be a big loss, definitely.
Husband used to work there, and if you didn't work there yourself, you know someone who did. So it's a huge part of the community. As I say, now scientists are saying that they are providing investment into the other arms of their business and other plants around the country. But the relocation plan, when this plant closes in April, will see everyone move, for those who retain their jobs, move to Cheshire, which is nowhere near Luton, it goes without saying. So the community aspect of this is quite sad and important. We did hear from Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, as you just played, but we also heard from the Business Secretary, who said that he's pleased that the investment is staying within the UK. That's true, but I think it's small beer to the people here in Luton.
Adam Cherry, thank you very much indeed for bringing us the very latest there from Luton.
Well, joining us now to discuss this further is the Director of Net Zero Watch, Andrew Montford. Andrew, thanks for joining us. Is this closure the direct result of net zero policies and the previous government's plan to fine vehicle manufacturers if they don't sell the target number of electric vehicles?
I think this must be seen as a major part of it. I mean, clearly, manufacturing in the UK is a tough business when you're up against, countries with much lower cost bases like China. Labour in China is much cheaper. We have hobbled ourselves, though, with very high energy prices because we insist on doing renewables. And then to add insult to injury, we have this daft zero emission vehicle mandate whereby we fine manufacturers if they don't sell enough electric vehicles. So, yeah, I think to large part we have shot ourselves in the foot here. And, I don't think this is going to be the end of it. I think we will see more closures in the months and years to come. So I think Labour sort of waving their hands and saying we're going to have a consultation feels to me as though they're kicking the issue into the long grass. They're hoping that, by the time the consultation's finished, the anger has dissipated and they get away with it. I think the reality of it is that there is a lot more pain to come.
Andrew, do we need to perhaps just lean in to this new reality? I mean, it is the case, it has been the case, frankly, for decades, that it's more expensive to make stuff in this country than it is with countries, as you say, that have cheaper labour forces or cheaper energy. I mean, that's got worse in recent years, but it's always been comparatively worse. Do we not need to lean in to the ideas first written down by Adam Smith in the 1700s, that actually we should stick to doing what we do best and leave other people to make things? Is that the new reality?
I think the thing is that EVs are not actually a commercial prospect. They're kept afloat by government mandates, because we have to have them according to the government. It's central planning. So I don't think we're leaning into anything particularly. We do also, I should say, the Western Europe has a huge technological advantage in terms of internal combustion engines. We are very good at them over here. We're probably better than the Chinese, but the Chinese are probably technologically better than anybody in the West, apart perhaps from Tesla, at electric vehicles. So, we're not really going with the flow here. We are trying to mandate an end in the way that the communists used to mandate the way things should be. And, that's a huge mistake. It's always been a mistake. It's always led to economic disaster, and we can see it leading to economic disaster now, and we shouldn't be surprised.
Andrew, it seems that there is declining public consent for these targets. When the targets were first introduced, 2030, then extended to 2035 by the last government, it seemed a long way away. But of course, now we're only 5 years away from that 2030 target if Labour do bring the date back. Do you think the public realise just how monumental this change is going to be? And do you think there will be unrest as we approach the deadline?
I think we will see unrest, yes. I think the public is becoming aware quite quickly of the amount of pain and disruption that they're going to have to go to. I mean, a lot of these issues are only just starting to impinge on people's consciousness. So things like energy rationing, which is going to become a reality. That's what your smart meter is for. It's so they can switch off your appliances. That is going to be very unpleasant for people, and it's going to come as a shock. I don't think people will allow it to happen. Eventually, they will turn on the government. The problem I think the public has at the moment is that both Labour and Conservatives are still tied to the net zero delusion, if you like. And I think we may well see people going towards reform and things, but once they realise just how bad this is going to be.
OK, well, Andrew Montford, thank you so much for joining us here and talking through what is a sad day for the country, really. Director of Net Zero Watch there.
Well, I really don't want an electric car. I'm quite happy with mine, and I'm worried about the cost of buying them, to be quite honest, because it's pushing up the cost of everybody's cars. But anyway...
I've got to reveal, I'm looking at buying one.
Well, good for you, but I object to buying anything on finance because of the enormous amount of money you pay to the bank.
Yeah.
I would prefer to buy them second-hand when they're 5 years old.
If you do the PCP thing, you can get them every 2 years and get a new one.
Yes, well, no, I don't. A second-hand car, then you can run it into the ground. It doesn't matter how many crisps and sweets and breadsticks there are in the back.
Speaks a woman with children.
How many cars you bump in the supermarket doesn't matter. It gets you from A to Z. That's all that matters.
Well, in other news, Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Fly. Could Russia really be using drones to engage in espionage on British soil? That's come after your latest headlines.
Very good afternoon to you. It's just after 1:30. The top story from the newsroom this hour. Well, making everything worse. That is the charge from Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch, accusing Sir Keir Starmer of dodging the Chancellor's pledge not to raise taxes or borrow more in the future. In a fiery exchange at Prime Minister's questions, Sir Keir Starmer hit back, saying the leader of the opposition wanted all the benefits of the budget without explaining how she'd pay for it.
If he wants to know what Conservatives would do, he should resign and find out. Until then, I'm the one asking the questions. There's a petition out there, 2 million people asking him to go. He's the one who doesn't know. He's the one who doesn't know how things work. It is not government that creates growth, Mr. Speaker. It is business.
Well, we were hoping to hear from Sir Keir Starmer there. You will have noted that was Kemi Badenoch. Let's take another listen to that response to those roars from the Labour bench, as Kemi Badenoch suggested that Sir Keir Starmer should, as you just heard there, resign over what she described as Labour's lies. In other news, Israel, for the second time since a ceasefire with Hezbollah came into force, has said its troops have fired shots in southern Lebanon. It comes as thousands of displaced residents in the south are returning home after 14 months of fighting there. However, Israel's warning people not to return until its forces have withdrawn from certain areas, which could take up to 2 months. Here, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer says the ceasefire is long overdue, calling for a political solution to end the crisis permanently. Meanwhile, aid organisations are now calling for that truce to extend into Gaza, where fighting is continuing. Christmas shoppers are being warned of a record wave of scams today, with cybercriminals set to target millions over the festive period. The mobile network EE expects to block over 10 million scam texts and 9 million scam calls this month, both up on last year's figures. The firm highlights common tactics like fake urgency or impersonation and is urging shoppers to secure their passwords, update devices and stay cautious of any unknown links or calls. The study shows 1 in 4 UK shoppers have been targeted during Christmas, with victims losing around £1,000 each. And just before I go, a quick update on a story we have been following here on GB News. We now hear that a 32-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder. That's after an 8-year-old girl was seriously hurt in a shooting on Sunday. That latest update just into us from the Metropolitan Police. That child was injured with her 34-year-old father after that gunman opened fire into their car in Ladbroke Grove on Sunday. Another 22-year-old man arrested on suspicion of that shooting has, though, been released on bail. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'll be back with you in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. It was a very wet start to the day for some. That rain is pulling away from eastern areas, and for most, it's a fine afternoon out there. The heavy rain overnight was caused by Storm Connell, named by the Dutch Weather Service because it's going to bring them some very strong winds and heavy rain in the coming hours. But the rain is now clearing for us. Still a bit damp over parts of Yorkshire, Lincolnshire, down into Norfolk. That rain edging away by sunset. For many, it's dry and fine. Some sunny spells across Scotland and Northern Ireland and Wales as well. Just a few showers coming into the far north. Staying quite cloudy across much of southern and eastern England, but as I said, at least that overnight rain is pulling through. Chilly feel out there, particularly with the winds along these North Sea coast, where we'll continue to feed a few showers in, and temperatures not actually getting above freezing for much of the day over the highlands of Scotland, and soon through this evening dipping back below freezing. A few showers coming into the far north. Fog has been a problem across Northern Ireland, and that will thicken up once more through this evening. so do watch out for that. We're also going to see later in the night some fog forming over parts of England and Wales, but for many it's a fine evening here with clear skies. We are going to see those temperatures tumbling. Still a few showers just coming into the extreme east of England and the far northeast of Scotland, but most will have a dry night. The fog thickening across Northern Ireland and then forming over parts of East Wales, the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast. And quite dense patches of fog are likely, so that could be a problem, particularly for tomorrow morning's rush hour, and we'll see a fairly extensive frost forming as well. So it's a cold start. That fog is going to be dense, should clear from Northern Ireland through the morning as the breeze picks up, but for parts of the Midlands and eastern England, that fog may well linger for a good chunk of the day. Further west, we'll see thickening cloud, a bit of rain coming into Northern Ireland, a few showers for Wales and the southwest, but again, many places dry, but a cold day, particularly if that fog sticks around.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. Some queues in Glasgow. The M8 westbound just towards Charing Cross at 18. There was a breakdown. All lanes open. Still looking slow. There's a breakdown as well. Southbound M6 around Crewe, junction 17 to 16. So queues building and a lane closed. Long queues building too southbound down the M1 in Leicestershire. So from Ashby de la Zouch down towards Leicester, junction 22 to 21. All the traffic on hold for a 2-lorry collision there. Southbound M1 as well, still looking slow in the roadworks. Just after Bedford at 13, there was an earlier lorry involved in a collision. That's been dealt with, all lanes open, still struggling though. And the A31 in Dorset closed both ways between the Merley roundabout and the Canford Bottom roundabout in Winbourne. Queues there for investigation work. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 20 to 2 and hell to pay. That's the warning a senior Trump ally issued to world leaders who support the arrest warrant issued by the International Criminal Court for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Well, Kevin Roberts, who leads the influential Heritage Foundation think tank, which is credited with much of Donald Trump's policy agenda, last night he revealed the fury of the incoming administration towards many in Trump's to what many in Trump's orbit regard as an illegitimate court.
Well, since that arrest warrant was issued, Keir Starmer has tried to fudge the issue of whether or not the United Kingdom would abide by the ICC's ruling. He's refused to answer directly any questions over the potential arrest.
Well, the Prime Minister may have to come off the fence sooner rather than later, as Roberts made it clear to GB News last night that there will be hell to pay, and this is a direct quote, there will be hell to pay for any international leader buying into this BS.
Well, strong warnings. Joining us now is Alan Mendoza, the Executive Director at the Henry Jackson Society. Alan, Donald Trump and his team are taking this very, very seriously. Do you think Keir Starmer will be worried by what Trump's allies are saying?
Yes, I think he would, because we've now heard it from several sources that there is going to be some kind of sanction or punishment should countries decide to take this ridiculous ICC kangaroo court warrant seriously. And I think any country that wants to have good relations with the US is going to pay a lot of attention to this. And I would imagine that Number 10 will be very concerned, given where they've been on the issue already, where they've been quite out in front of it, whereas a number of other countries have been more circumspect, waiting to see what might emanate from the US and have been a little quieter on the subject. So it might have been a real tactical error here by the British government.
Yes, fascinatingly, the German federal spokesperson has said that they will be minded not to carry out any arrests of any Israeli who comes onto their territory, perhaps due to the history of that country. But also, just in the last 2 or 3 hours, the French have now seemed to be turning away from the ICC ruling or indeed arrest warrant themselves too. I mean, it could be that of the large countries in Europe, the UK's out on a limb here.
Yes, totally. I mean, the German case is fascinating. I've had it privately confirmed by both the CDU and SPD sources that they will not enforce the warrant. So that's quite clear where they are. The French, as you've said, have now drawn back from the original position that seemed to be they would. And now they're having doubts. They think there might be immunity. They're looking at legal solutions. And we are, of the big three, as it were, in Europe, we are the ones who are looking a little awkward at having not done that. So yes, we're in a bad position and it needs to change.
Henry, it would be easy for Labour to dismiss this arrest warrant. There are many legal problems with the decision, not least the fact that Israel is not a signatory to the ICC and therefore the court doesn't have any jurisdiction over its citizens. But of course, if they did challenge this ruling, they'd be challenging the legitimacy of the ICC. And of course, Keir Starmer is very fond of international organisations. So how do you think this is going to play out over the coming weeks and months, particularly when Trump is inaugurated in January?
Well, the fatal error was not to challenge the interim request by the prosecutor to the court. We should have been challenging that, as the previous government wanted to, back in July. Instead, this government allowed it to pass through. Had they done that, they'd have been part of the legal process and would probably have been able to stop it. So it's an entire own goal here. And you're right, the Prime Minister is very interested in process, particularly legal process. He regards this as more important than outcome, the fact that a process has taken place. And here we are with a terrible outcome, a process that he's kind of left holding in support of. And it makes us look rather silly when it's an obvious point to see that there are numerous legal problems with the warrant and the process that has gone through to get it.
I mean, this pretty explosive reaction to the ICC warrant from someone so close within the orbit of Donald Trump, someone who's such a close ally and confidant in many ways. Does this tell us more about how the Trump White House will respond to other issues of foreign policy? I'm thinking particularly about the Chagos Islands.
Yes, I think if they feel that there's been either an egregious, kind of insult to justice, as it were, or there is something that has fundamentally jarred with US national security interest, they're not going to sit back and allow it to pass by as maybe the Biden administration would have done. Instead, they're going to be forthright about it in terms of protecting American interests and indeed values. And I think that's part of, if you like, putting America first, as it were. It's about putting their values and interests first, as most nations would. We would do the same, or we should do the same as well with British interests and values. And they're not going to be shy about saying it and taking action.
Now, Henry, Trump has promised to end the conflict in the Middle East. And of course, we've seen the ceasefire yesterday between Lebanon and Israel. But this will pose enormous problems for any sort of negotiation, won't it? Because if Benjamin Netanyahu can't safely leave Israel, except perhaps for the United States, how on earth are these negotiations going to take place?
Well, on the negotiation front, it probably actually won't affect it, because negotiations will just be shuttle diplomacy going between the capitals. That's how those things normally work. But on a more general point, in the conduct of diplomacy, this is a democratic ally we're talking about. This is not a terrorist organization. This is not a rogue state. This is a democratic ally with a judiciary system that's been proven many times to be able to hold it to account. And to suggest that we cannot invite the leader of that country to our country is an affront, frankly, to democratic practice and principle. So it's a much even bigger issue than simply negotiations. It's a total fail, if you like, for the idea of democratic solidarity.
Absolutely fascinating stuff there. Well, Alan Mendoza, Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society, thanks so much for joining us here on GB News this afternoon. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
I mean, Netanyahu is like a cat with 9 lives, isn't he? He's been Prime Minister so many times. He was so unpopular. And actually, the ICC ruling has given him a boost, because it's ordinary Israelis are affronted by the fact that their democratically elected leader, even if they don't like him, has been censored like this by an international court.
And it is extraordinary, the sort of the weak response that we've seen from the United Kingdom government that as Alan was saying, puts process ahead of justice.
But I thought that was an excellent point. They've basically left it too late. Had they intervened early on in the process, it would have worked. But now they're essentially calling into question the legitimacy of the whole court, and that's a big problem for Labour.
Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News, and there's plenty more to come.
Another day, another storm. Batten down the hatches. Storm Connell wreaked havoc overnight. But is the coast clear now? Stay with us to find out.
Headliners, Tomorrow's papers tonight, every night from 11 p.m.
This is Miss Universe fans hailing the end of wokeness and crediting the Trump effect after a biological woman, there's still some of them around apparently, has won the 2024 crown. She's Miss Denmark, because obviously the last decade, you know, it's just been a beast transgender smurfs from Papua New Guinea. They're the only people allowed to win any beauty contest, you know what I mean? You're not allowed to have any...
There's some of the trans women have won these, you definitely wouldn't say no.
Honestly, I've seen some, but I've seen some of them that didn't, and some that, you know, were clearly just there out of, you know... Well,
have there been more than one trans woman who's won Miss? I didn't realise this.
Yeah.
Okay,
I've got a chart at home. This one isn't trans. Victoria Kjær Thielvig, 21 of Denmark. Everything about that description says attractive.
Nazis. Okay, yeah. I have seen pictures of her. She is very attractive.
Yes.
She is. Yes. I don't know exactly how to put it, but she is kind of not retro or vintage or so. She's quite an old-fashioned notion of beauty, like just absolutely ice blue eyes, you know,
no penis.
Absolutely extraordinary, clear skin and gorgeous blonde hair. I mean, it's absolutely kind of mid-70s, you know, beauty.
No, apparently the sanity's returned to the beauty pageant industry, so they can get back to, you know, sexualising 4-year-olds and promoting anorexia like they used to. So
there is that,
She will earn an estimated $250,000 annual salary working full-time as Miss Universe, and will live in a luxurious New York City apartment as she carries out her duties, which involve glass coffee tables and rich Saudi businessmen.
Glass coffee tables. And visiting other planets and solar systems and constellations, I would imagine, in Miss Universe.
Being concerned about animals.
Yes, absolutely, and wanting to bring about world peace. I miss those days.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Go to gbnews.com/shop now and take advantage of our biggest ever Black Friday sale with 25% off all items across our store and free shipping on orders worth £60 or more. There's never been a better time to grab something for the GB News fan in your life. From our signature clothing to drinkware, gifts, accessories and much, much more, you'll find the perfect present this festive season. Use the code BLACKFRIDAY25 on checkout at gbnews.com/shop for our best ever Black Friday deals.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 10 to 2 and another storm. This one called Connell. See how they do this? A, B, C, Bert, Connell.
Well spotted.
Yeah, it's genius. I don't know what happens if we get more than 26 storms in a year.
Start again.
I guess we go back, or, you know. Anyway, well, it brought heavy rain and flooding overnight, which has led some key rail lines to being forced shut, passengers being told not to travel on many parts of the network.
Well, that's as many regions are still left clearing up after Storm Bert. And the Met Office has issued yellow weather warnings for rainfall in several areas into this afternoon.
Well, joining us now from the Met Office headquarters is the meteorologist Alex Deakin. Alex, thanks for joining us. I'm frankly surprised that we got the third storm quite so soon after the second. I mean, should we brace ourselves for sort of a rat-a-tat-tat of further storms throughout this coming few weeks?
You often get the atmosphere set up so it can produce storms, and we had 3 in a week a few years ago. So, yeah, it's not uncommon to have one kind of following quite quickly after another. This one, it has to be said, hasn't really affected the UK, certainly not as badly as Bert. This one was named by the Dutch Weather Service. They don't name storms very often because they normally affect Ireland or the UK first. So this was named by the Dutch Weather Service because it's bringing them particularly extreme weather, very gusty winds and heavy rain at the moment, actually, and for the rest of the afternoon. So thankfully, once this is out of the way, the weather does look a lot calmer for the whole of the UK as we go through the weekend and into next week.
Is that how storms are named then? The country which is hit by the storm first is allowed to name it as long as it follows the alphabetical pattern?
Well, we're in conjunction with Met Aaron from the Met Service from the Republic of Ireland and KNMI, the Dutch Weather Service. So the three of us work together because we're kind of in the same kind of path. There's also a similar system with the French and the Spanish and the Portuguese. So they have their separate alphabet as well. And then there's one for Northern Europe. So, yeah, we're in conjunction with the Netherlands and with the Republic of Ireland. And we work together through our alphabetical list. It starts in September, runs to the end of August.
That's fascinating. That explains why the Dutch picked the name Connell, which I would have assumed to be an Irish choice. I guess there's a list. But sorry, you are, of course, a meteorologist, and we're asking you all sorts of alphabetical questions. We should stick to the weather. What can we expect for next week?
It's okay. I know about the storm. That's all right. That's no problem at all. But yeah, there's a big discussion actually. We talk phrases about it. There's a big discussion about whose name's what, and we have the list set out. That takes ages. But anyway, yes. Next week's weather does look a lot calmer. It's going to be frosty tonight. Fog is actually the biggest problem tonight. So last night we were wet and windy, certainly in the south. Tonight it's the opposite. It's frost and fog that are going to cause the problem. So some quite dense patches of fog. And then it gets a bit warmer through the weekend. There'll be some rain around, but it's kind of back to more classic November fare. So nothing too extreme. It doesn't look like it at this stage. Bit of rain here and there. Most places, though, turning quite a bit milder through the weekend, which will be noticeable after the cold weather tonight.
Well, Alex, we're going to have to leave it there. Maybe the next storm will be Storm Deacon. We will be on D after all, if you get there first. Anyway, please do stay with us on Good Afternoon Britain. We've plenty more to come.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. It was a very wet start to the day for some. That rain is pulling away from eastern areas, and for most, it's a fine afternoon out there. The heavy rain overnight was caused by Storm Connell, named by the Dutch Weather Service because it's going to bring them some very strong winds and heavy rain in the coming hours. But the rain is now clearing for us. Still a bit damp over parts of Yorkshire, Lincolnshire, down into Norfolk. That rain edging away by sunset. For many, it's dry and fine. Some sunny spells across Scotland and Northern Ireland and Wales as well. Just a few showers coming into the far north. Staying quite cloudy across much of southern and eastern England, but as I said, at least that overnight rain is pulling through. Chilly feel out there, particularly with the winds along these North Sea coast. We'll continue to feed a few showers in, and temperatures not actually getting above freezing for much of the day over the highlands of Scotland, and soon through this evening dipping back below freezing. A few showers coming into the far north. Fog has been a problem across Northern Ireland, and that will thicken up once more through this evening. So do watch out for that. We're also going to see later in the night some fog forming over parts of England and Wales. But for many, it's a fine evening here with clear skies. We are going to see those temperatures tumbling. Still a few showers just coming into the extreme east of England and the far northeast of Scotland, but most will have a dry night. The fog thickening across Northern Ireland and then forming over parts of East Wales, the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast. And quite dense patches of fog are likely, so that could be a problem, particularly for tomorrow morning's rush hour, and we'll see a fairly extensive frost forming as well. So it's a cold start. That fog is going to be dense. Should clear from Northern Ireland through the morning as the breeze picks up, but for parts of the Midlands and eastern England, that fog may well linger for a good chunk of the day. Further west, we'll see thickening cloud, a bit of rain coming into Northern Ireland, a few showers for Wales and the southwest, but again, many places dry, but a cold day, particularly if that fog sticks around.
We can expect clear skies, leading to a light and warm day ahead. Lovely. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Imagine getting a call to tell you that you've won £50,000 in tax-free cash, our biggest cash prize of the year.
Oh my God.
That's a big surprise.
Oh my God. This is amazing.
I'm in shock. That is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
For your chance to win £50,000 cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss my big opinion. Mark meets and my take at 10. Democracy is a funny old thing. And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Wednesday, the 27th of November. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Miriam Cates. Now, a convicted terrorist who groomed the Manchester Arena bomber, Salman Abedi, has been freed from prison despite a parole board saying they fear he will reoffend. Can this be in the best interests of the British public?
Keir Starmer faced demands from not one, but two of his MPs at Prime Minister's Question Time to introduce blasphemy law, including banning the desecration of holy books. The Prime Minister sidestepped the issue. That's unlike him.
And from Russia with drones? Could flying objects spotted over Air Force bases in the UK really be part of a sinister plot by Putin? All eyes look eastwards as cabinet ministers are banned from Russia and questions are asked about a series of strange events across the country.
Well, I heard one Member of Parliament stand up, elected as a Labour Member of Parliament, and say we should have a definition of Islamophobia. And of course, having that sort of definition is opening the door to this sort of blasphemy law. I thought, goodness me, that's a bit sort of out of the ordinary for a parliament in a liberal democracy to want to institute blasphemy law. And 3 questions later, another question, this time asking for the desecration, the so-called desecration of holy books, to be banned. I mean, I was half expecting, half a dozen more questions then to come. I mean, it's extraordinary.
It is quite shocking for British MPs to have called for those things. Now, of course, the Prime Minister just battered them away. You wouldn't expect him to agree to that. I mean, I very much hope he doesn't. But the fact that they've been asked by British MPs, who are the representative of British citizens, is quite astonishing given our record on free speech. But it also calls into question the usefulness of having these months and these weeks. Islamophobia Awareness Month. There's a month or a week for everything. And I think it just emphasises the difference between us rather than bringing people together. I'm really not a fan of all these different weeks and months.
I can't keep track of the days, the months. I don't know.
Let's do Remembrance Day and the traditional religious festivals, and other than that,
Oh,
Every day is everybody's
bring
day.
back Trafalgar Day as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, we should celebrate important dates in history because that is what brings us together because it's part of British heritage.
Yeah.
Too many days.
No,
too many badges.
But it is extraordinary, and I really do want your views on this. We'll try to get to some a little bit later in the programme. gbnews.com/your say. What do you think Keir Starmer should have said in response to those questions that he sort of just didn't answer? What should the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland have said when he was asked to make illegal the desecration of holy books?
And because they were Labour MPs, he would have had advance warning, so he could have prepared an answer. So there we go. Anyway, lots more to come after your headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you from the newsroom, just coming up to 4 minutes past 2. Making everything worse, that is the charge from Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch today, accusing Sir Keir Starmer of dodging the Chancellor's pledge not to raise taxes or to borrow any more in the future. In a fiery exchange at Prime Minister's questions earlier, Sir Keir Starmer hit back, though, saying the leader of the opposition wanted all of the benefits of the budget without explaining how she'd pay for it.
2 weeks ago, she stood there and said that she wanted all the investment, all the benefits of the budget, but she didn't know how she was going to pay for it. I noticed that having come here criticising the national insurance rises over and over again, on Monday she admitted that she wouldn't reverse the position that was set out. Meanwhile, her science minister was saying he was going energetically to do the opposite. They really haven't got a clue what they're doing.
In response to those roars from the Labour benches, Kemi Badenoch suggested Sir Keir Starmer should resign over what she described as Labour's lies.
If he wants to know what Conservatives would do, he should resign and find out. Until then, I'm the one asking the questions. There's a petition out there, 2 million people asking him to go. He's the one who doesn't know. He's the one who doesn't know how things work. It is not government that creates growth, Mr. Speaker. It is business.
Roads and railways across the country have been hit by flooding today and various stations evacuated as Storm Connell drenched southern England with up to half a month's rain. In London, King's Cross Station was forced to shut due to overcrowding, with commuters there describing absolute mayhem. And trains have also been unable to stop at platforms at Euston Station. More than 90 flood warnings are still in place across the UK, including one severe alert for Billing Aquadrome in Northamptonshire, where flooding poses a danger to life. A man from Bradford has been arrested on suspicion of stalking and harassment after videos of various women, on nights out in Manchester went viral. Greater Manchester police say the footage shows women being followed, harassed and, in some cases, subjected to upskirting. It's believed to be the first arrest in the UK linked to videos made accessible behind paywalls on some social media platforms. Officers say the content has caused fear among women in the city of Manchester, but that extra patrols are in place to keep people safe over the festive season. They're also now urging anyone affected to get in touch. 6 people have been arrested in London as part of counter-terrorism investigations into suspected activity linked to the Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK, a proscribed terrorist organisation. The suspects, aged between 23 and 62, were detained under the Terrorism Act, with officers conducting searches at 8 addresses across the city, including the Kurdish Community Centre in Haringey. Police, though, say there is no immediate threat to the public, but the centre will remain closed for up to 2 weeks as that investigation continues. Israel, for the second time now since a ceasefire with Hezbollah came into force, says its troops have fired shots into southern Lebanon. It comes as thousands of displaced residents in the south are returning home after 14 months of fighting. However, Israel's warning people not to return until its forces have fully withdrawn, which could take up to 2 months. Here, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer says the ceasefire is long overdue and calls for a political solution to end the crisis permanently. Meanwhile, aid organisations are calling for the truce to extend to Gaza, where fighting continues. Here in England, parents will soon benefit from 30 minutes of free childcare at the start of the school day as the government rolls out breakfast clubs. Applications are now open for 750 primary schools to join a £7 million trial with free breakfasts and childcare starting in April. Chancellor Rachel Reeves has pledged to triple funding for the scheme to over £30 million by 2025 and is calling it a landmark opportunity to improve attendance, improve behaviour and family support. Well, Under-Secretary for Education Stephen Morgan spoke to us earlier here on GB News, and he says the scheme will break down the barriers to opportunity.
Free breakfast clubs in every primary school in the country, I believe, will make a big difference. We know that it's good for behaviour, it's good for attainment, and it's good for attendance as well. And it also will provide parents' choices around childcare. And we want to do this because we know it will make a big difference to children's lives and make sure that they succeed at school.
And TV presenter Davina McCall says she's stronger and stronger every day after surgery to remove a benign brain tumour. Posting to Instagram today, she credited sleep with aiding her recovery and improving short-term memory, which had been affected by the operation. Davina, who has a bruised eye from that procedure, says she's being brilliantly cared for by her husband and her stepmum. And she's now focusing on rest, saying even a short nap is now leaving her feeling renewed and refreshed. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'll be back with you in half an hour. Now, though, it's back to Miriam and Tom.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 9 minutes past 2. Now, the Home Office has told GB News it has robust measures in place to manage the risk posed by terrorist offenders released from prison.
Well, this follows the news that a convicted terrorist believed to have groomed the Manchester Arena bomber has been freed from jail despite serious concerns that he'll reoffend. Abdel-Rauf Abdallah was released yesterday, less than 2 months after the parole board denied him early release, claiming he still posed a high risk of harm to the public.
Well, joining us now is our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, a lot of the country will be concerned that 2 months ago the parole board thought this guy's not fit to be on our streets, and now he is.
Yeah, the difficulty is, though, 2 months ago the parole had it within their gift to deny him release from prison. Now they can do nothing about that because he has served his full sentence, and that's why he's now back on the street, released from prison in East Yorkshire yesterday. And we understand there are measures being taken by the authorities to try to ensure that this individual doesn't cause harm, but there are real concerns because this is a man who was a childhood friend of Salman Abedi, the bomber, the Manchester Arena bomber, who had visited him in prison on a number of occasions, and it's believed, according to the official Manchester Arena inquiry report, that this man, Abdel-Rauf Abdallah, did in fact groom and radicalise Mr. Abedi. So as far as his potential risk factors are concerned, they're right there.
And it's not a hypothetical concern to think that he may offend again. This has happened in the past, hasn't it, to other terrorists that have been released? Yeah,
we only need to think back to 2019 and that terrible attack at Fishmongers Hall on London Bridge, the second attack on London Bridge in the space of just a couple of years. And that was Usman Khan, who was approaching the end of his prison term, convicted of terrorism offences, was on a rehabilitation programme and attending that event. Those were images of Usman Khan being confronted and shot dead by armed police on London Bridge, but not after he stabbed and killed 2 people at Fishmongers Hall. And then, just months after that, another terrorist prisoner who had been released, Sudesh Aman, then went on to try and attack and did indeed stab 2 people in Streatham in South London, stabbed 2 people and was then shot by armed police down in Streatham as well. So it absolutely shows that those being released from prison, and they're not the only ones, terrorist offenders who've been released that have gone on to commit further terrorist offences, but they are extreme examples of those who've gone on to kill or try to kill.
People sitting at home, watching or listening to this, will be frankly appalled that there are so many cases just within very recent history of these offenders reoffending, that the parole board said just 2 months ago that this individual should not be released, and now he's being released. A lot of people sitting at home will think, damn due process, surely the security and the safety of the country comes first.
Well, that's absolutely right. And the only way that you can kind of guard against this is to have even tougher sentences for those convicted of terrorism offences, which many people would think is absolutely right and called for. You remember, after those 2 attacks that I just mentioned, there was a clamour then for tougher measures, and the then Conservative government introduced rules that anybody who is a convicted terrorist does not get released halfway through their sentence, as normal run-of-the-mill criminals convicted in jail do. They have to serve 3/4 of their sentence. So perhaps there's a case actually for terrorist offenders serving the whole of the jail term behind bars.
That was meant to be the toughening up from the previous government. That, we're not going to let them out halfway through their time. We're going to let them out early. We're still going to let them out early, but only 3/4 of the way. That was meant to be the really... I bet there were people saying, oh, this is too tough. You're being too tough on these terrorists. But what a nonsense.
Well, you could absolutely argue that, and I wouldn't argue against that assertion. To add to the real concerns going forward here, the police and security services are facing a reckoning now, because all of those who they very diligently investigated and then mounted prosecutions against and then jailed are now, or many of them are now, in the process of being released. All the Al-Qaeda era terrorists that were jailed have served very lengthy jail terms of 20+ years. They've now reached the end of that process and they're coming back onto the streets. And now we're also seeing that with the ISIS era terrorists. Like Abdul Rauf Abdallah, who has now reached the end of his sentence and is back on the streets. You can't monitor all of these people all of the time. There's just too many of them. And they need to make judgment calls. Most of the time they get it right, but when they get it wrong, we can see that playing out in the terms of the likes of a terrorist attack that we've seen in the past.
Well, Mark, thank you very much for your insight. And joining us now to continue discussing this is the former head of counter-terrorism at the City of London, Kevin Hurley. Kevin, are you concerned about the release of this man? Do you think there's a high chance that he will go on to reoffend?
Yeah, I'm fairly sure he will do. The indications are, from the professionals who've dealt with him, that he's not changed in the slightest. Of course, what's not known here is that he's a paraplegic from his involvement in the Libyan war in the past. So he's going to be sat at home, festering away, even though they will try and deprive him of access to the internet and mobile phones, which they can do under various terrorist prevention provisions. He's still going to do that. So he's still probably going to fester away and groom and push other people into extreme acts. Of course, the issue here is, and again, it's always a question of be careful what you wish for. Under the old Labour government, they brought in a penalty called an indeterminate public protection order, where although a judge would give you a sentence, as in this case of 9.5 years, they would attach that an IPP, which meant if probation and parole think you should not be released in the interests of public protection, you won't be released. Well, what's happened over recent years, there's been a big groundswell from the activists and liberals saying these IPPs are bad. There are people who are only sentenced to 2 or 3 years for robbery who are still inside because they're still judged bad. So what have we done? We've stopped them under the previous Conservative government. Well, you know, there's a case here for saying that there was a good reason behind bringing in these IPPs, and this would be a case in part, as would all these other people that Mark Stone has just mentioned, of saying, well, maybe we should actually say, you know what? prison does work, because when people are locked up in prison, they can't hurt, attack, or rob us.
Well, that's
So
true,
never mind,
but
you know,
in this case, though,
prison doesn't work.
in this case, Abdullah was known to have had contact with the Manchester Arena bomber. Indeed, it's believed that the bomber phoned him in prison whilst making the bomb. So, sadly, it does seem that terrorism can continue from behind bars.
Well, that's why I'm saying you need to bring back the indeterminate public protection orders that Bleeding Hearts did away with in the last couple of years, because they were all seen as bad. But frankly, all of these terrorists, it's a some of them.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Kevin. Your line seems to be breaking up there. We'll see if we can re-establish that with Kevin Hurley, because the former head of counter-terrorism at the City of London, really important stuff that he was saying. But I think many people will be just sitting gobsmacked, realising that this is the process, that people who are still deemed to be a threat, still deemed to be a danger, are being let out. And as recently as, well, the Blair government, they weren't.
Yes, but these indeterminate public protection orders, they did seem to have been applied to people who perhaps they shouldn't have been. And so, of course, it was a factor in prison overcrowding. Now, you might argue there are many people who should never be released, but that doesn't apply to many criminals, but it should apply to terrorists.
Why is it the response of politicians and governments, whenever prisons are overcrowded, to say, OK, we should release prisoners? Why don't we just build more blooming prisons?
Well, I agree. And we managed to build a lot of things very quickly during COVID, etc. Why can't we do it with prisons? I think many people would agree with you, although a lot of MPs didn't want prisons in their constituency, Tom, so there you go.
It's not in my backyard.
Anyway, much more to come. The government has announced that it will review electric vehicle sales targets following Vauxhall's announcement yesterday that it was going to close its van-making factory in Luton, which is putting over 1,000 jobs at risk.
Well, let's cross over to Luton now, where our reporter Adam Cherry is outside the Vauxhall factory. Adam, what's going on where you are?
Well, the people here are, as you would expect, very disappointed and upset by this change. I've been speaking to people all afternoon to get their thoughts on this. 1,100 jobs at risk. There is a plan to send some of those jobs to another plant in Cheshire, but Cheshire, of course, is a long way from Luton, and this is the bedrock of this local community. So even if that happens, it's still going to be it's going to be hugely affected on families and local people. So take a look at what people had to say to me earlier today.
Vauxhall was a massive part of Luton, and if this is the last 1,100 jobs to go, you know, it's a bit of a death knell for the town, I think. It's not great.
You know, to buy an electric car, you need to take out a mortgage, don't you? And not everyone is going to do it.
My husband worked there for years, and it's everyone you know is somebody that has actually worked there, so it is going to be a big loss, definitely.
Now, we heard the Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, say today in the House of Commons that they are opening a consultation into the zero-emission vehicles target. That mandate, if you're a car manufacturer and you sell over 22% of your vehicles as non-zero emissions, you get whacked with a fine, £15,000 per vehicle. They might look at changing that, but it's going to be too little too late for the people here in Luton, and they nonetheless remain committed to their 2030 target to get all new petrol and diesel vehicles off the roads, out of the market. So it's still a hugely significant issue, and I think the people here are going to feel the effects of it for a very long time.
Well, Adam Cherry, thank you very much for that very latest update from Luton.
Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up on today's show.
Indeed, from Russia with drones. We're working on it. Is Putin really engaging in espionage on British soil? Find out shortly.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Donna Ida, who joins us now. And Donna, you look spectacular in your gorgeous denim jumpsuit.
Thank you.
And accessories. And it's important, isn't it, sometimes, just to keep things simple?
I always keep things simple. I travel a lot, I work long hours, and I don't want to think too much about what I'm wearing. So for me, one and done is perfect. Good accessories, fresh hair, nice makeup, and you can go anywhere, including GB News when you didn't know what was happening.
There we go.
Perfect.
Welcome.
Straight off the plane.
Can we ask you some of our top denim questions?
Yes.
Because Stephen Dixon, the presenter of The Breakfast Show who's just on, said that double denim to him is an absolute no-go.
Oh, what does
Is that true?
Don't have him on again, darling.
OK. We're telling me
I
fact.
love double denim.
Really?
I love it. I think it is so cool.
Does it have to be a different tone?
I was going to say double denim, same colour.
Or same
I
tones?
like the... For me, I actually do like the same. Think Saint Laurent 70s. There's an amazing one that we're doing that's going to look great on you in this season. The Joan Jean, we've got the City Slicker shirt. Oh, it's amazing. If it's done well, it's perfect. And I like it in a paler blue, but a good mid to dark. Very chic.
Yeah, you go.
No, well, I was just thinking, little old me, not quite sure
You'd look amazing
what to wear
in
this
it.
morning.
He
How
was a
do
bit
guys
stressed.
pull off denim?
For me, if I was dressing you, I would have put you in a pair of jeans this morning with his amazing jumper. Gorgeous watch.
Black, blue?
Black denim I do like. Men don't like it so much. Men like charcoal denim.
Oh, I don't like grey.
Charcoal. I love grey, and the best seller for men is charcoal denim.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Go to gbnews.com/shop now and take advantage of our biggest ever Black Friday sale with 25% off all items across our store and free shipping on orders worth £60 or more. There's never been a better time to grab something for the GB News fan in your life. From our signature clothing to drinkware, gifts, accessories and much, much more, you'll find the perfect present this festive season. Use the code BLACKFRIDAY25 on checkout at gbnews.com/shop for our best ever Black Friday deals.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 24 minutes past 2, and Russian tensions with the UK are seemingly escalating as Moscow has banned key cabinet ministers, including Angela Rayner and Yvette Cooper, from entering Russia.
They must be so disappointed. Meanwhile, British troops are investigating drone sightseeings near a US airbase to discover if they could be part of a sinister Russian plot.
And this comes as a DHL plane crash in Lithuania is under close scrutiny with links to suspected Russian operation. Well, joining us now in the studio, we have Charlie Peters. Is Russia singling out the UK with various different targeting, including this banning of cabinet ministers, but also, I think, calling in the ambassador yesterday in Moscow?
Well, I think there are plenty of other nations who are on the Russian bad list, as it were. And just in regards to your introduction there, talking about the situation with these drones, we don't have any conclusive evidence to say that Moscow are behind that action. But I have to say, looking at all the evidence that we have so far, it seems to me highly unlikely that this is being conducted by amateur drone hobbyists. First and foremost, this is the pattern. OK, if you're a hobbyist, you probably stick to a pattern. You have a job you go to, you do something in the day, you're doing the same thing at the same location around the same time. But I think the MOD analysts and the soldiers tasking with looking at this, they'll notice pretty quickly that pattern analysis of the drone sightings we've seen at various US Air Force bases in the east of England around Norfolk haven't been clear. The pattern is random. There is the absence of the normal and the presence of the abnormal, which is all a warning and indicator this is being conducted by a serious espionage power or a more sophisticated non-state actor. Who can say at this stage what it is? But I would say, for my money, I don't think this is a group of amateur hobbyists messing around with an American Air Force base. And then that has some serious questions. Who is doing that? And more importantly, why are they doing it? This is America's firepower in Europe, comes out of that Air Force base, all of them around that part of the east of England. It's air fighters, it's refuelling. Fighters leaving that location will go across the continent and beyond into West Asia. They'll be dealing with situations in Gaza and Israel and Lebanon as well. So very serious location, probably just as important as Cyprus is to us, are those bases in England for the Americans. So if you want to send a message, you'll mess with them. And that's certainly what appears to be going on at the moment.
But is it just a message? Is this, if we're going to take as read, let's just, for the sake of argument, say this is the Russians. Are they trying to achieve something here? Are they trying to get reconnaissance or understand what their enemy is? Or are they just trying to psych us out?
If we were to assume that it is a state actor and therefore Russia, the most likely conductor of this activities at this stage, psyching out, the term you'd use there, psychological warfare is the other term. I think that's probably what they'd be looking at based on the information we have now. Because as we know, there has been that ratcheting of tensions in the last 2 weeks. And I think Russia, if they are doing this, they want to be able to show we can act on your air bases in your back garden. You might allow the Storm Shadow missiles and other armaments to be fired into Russian territory, but we can get into your territory too just as easily. And of course, we've seen them being acting the GRU, so the Russian heir to the KGB, acting with great success, very negatively for Britain, in this country for the best part of a decade.
And that's what's changed, hasn't it? That's the significant change that's happened between not having these drone sightings and having these drone sightings on joint US-UK bases. What are the two countries that have suddenly allowed their missiles to go into Russia? The US and the UK.
It would be a clear example, if we can establish who's behind this, of a clear reaction to those recent ratcheting of tensions. And I imagine Donald Trump is looking at this extremely nervously. He's going to walk into dealing with this situation in 2 months. If we're at the stage now where we're seeing espionage activity or disruption activity or denying the use of these airfields in Britain at this stage, well, we've still got a month and a half to go, 2 months to go before he takes power. He'll be hoping that those escalations of capabilities and the warnings that various actors can deploy on their enemies doesn't go much further than it is now. It's already a very difficult place to have people firing rockets into Russia and for there to be the sort of reaction at home.
Yes, because although he's promised to and wants to bring peace, he also cannot lose face and he cannot be seen to be not responding to aggression or intimidation of American forces. But in terms of the British response, if this is found to be Russia or whoever it is found to be, what might a British response look like?
Well, so far it's been sanctions. For pretty much everything Russia does, Britain sanctions them. And we can debate whether or not that's effective. There are competing views on this. That was one of the main actions taken after the Salisbury poisoning incident. Various people who were involved in that, identified by international partners, were placed on blacklists, etc. And we also have, as a part of that, seen the government expel diplomats. Well, I'm not sure how many are left to be expelled at this point after so many kind of back and forward situations there. But it's highly unlikely we'd see overt counterintelligence efforts from Britain that they'd publish in any way. I think we can agree that there's almost certainly similar levels of NATO interference in Russian capabilities with air power, signals, activities, all sorts of ways to deny and disrupt Russian efforts. The difference is we're not going to see it on GB News. They're not going to publish that information, whereas we can't avoid this stuff because it happens at home. It's obvious we have a free and open press. But what negatively impacts Russians, we're less likely to see, more likely to be censored. So we could be seeing reactions being taken by this state that, by the nature of the efforts of Western intelligence, we just never hear about.
Remains secret, indeed. Well, Charlie Peters, thank you very much for that insight. They do seem to be becoming increasingly audacious, the Russians.
Yeah, concerning. Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News, and there's plenty more to come.
Keir Starmer faced off against Kemi Badenoch at PMQs today as he was urged to introduce blasphemy laws by 2 MPs. That's after your headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you from the newsroom, fast approaching 32 minutes past 2 and making everything worse. That was the charge from Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch today as she accused Sir Keir Starmer of dodging the Chancellor's pledge not to raise taxes or borrow more in the future. In a fiery exchange at Prime Minister's questions, Sir Keir Starmer hit back, saying the leader of the opposition wanted all of the benefits of the budget without explaining how she'd pay for it.
2 weeks ago, she stood there and said that she wanted all the investment, all the benefits of the budget, but she didn't know how she was going to pay for it. I noticed that, having come here criticising the national insurance rises over and over again, on Monday she admitted that she wouldn't reverse the position that we set out meanwhile, her science minister was saying he was going energetically to do the opposite. They really haven't got a clue what they're doing.
In response to those roars from the Labour benches, Kemi Badenoch suggested Sir Keir Starmer should resign over what she described as Labour's lies.
If he wants to know what Conservatives would do, he should resign and find out. Until then, I'm the one asking the questions. There's a petition out there, 2 million people asking him to go. He's the one who doesn't know. He's the one who doesn't know how things work. It is not government that creates growth, Mr. Speaker. It is business.
In other news, roads and railways across the country have been hit by flooding and various stations were evacuated as Storm Connell drenched southern England, bringing up to half a month's rain. In London, King's Cross Station was forced to shut due to overcrowding, with commuters describing absolute mayhem at that station. And trains were also unable to stop at some platforms at Euston Station. More than 90 flood warnings are still in place across the UK, including a severe alert at Billing Aquadrome in Northamptonshire, where flooding poses a danger to life. 6 people have been arrested in London as part of a counter-terrorism investigation into suspected activity linked to the Kurdistan Workers' Party, also known as PKK. That is a proscribed terrorist organisation. The 6 suspects, aged between 23 and 62, were detained under the Terrorism Act, with officers conducting searches at 8 addresses across the capital, including the Kurdish Community Centre in Haringey. Police there say there is no immediate threat to the public, but the centre will remain closed for up to 2 weeks as their investigation continues. And TV presenter Davina McCall says she's stronger and stronger every day after surgery to remove a benign brain tumour. Posting to Instagram, she credited sleep with aiding her recovery and improving short-term memory, which had been affected by the operation. Davina, who has a bruised eye from that procedure, says she's being brilliantly cared for by her husband and her stepmum. She's now focusing on rest and says that even a short nap is leaving her feeling refreshed and renewed. That's it from me for now. Sophia Wensler will be here with your full update at 3 o'clock. Now, though, it's back to Tom and Miriam.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. It was a very wet start to the day for some. That rain is pulling away from eastern areas, and for most, it's a fine afternoon out there. The heavy rain overnight was caused by Storm Connell, named by the Dutch Weather Service because it's going to bring them some very strong winds and heavy rain in the coming hours. But the rain is now clearing for us. Still a bit damp over parts of Yorkshire, Lincolnshire, down into Norfolk. That rain edging away by sunset. For many, it's dry and fine. Some sunny spells across Scotland and Northern Ireland and Wales as well. Just a few showers coming into the far north. Staying quite cloudy across much of southern and eastern England, but as I said, at least that overnight rain is pulling through. Chilly feel out there, particularly with the winds along these North Sea coast, where we'll continue to feed a few showers in, and temperatures not actually getting above freezing for much of the day over the highlands of Scotland, and soon through this evening dipping back below freezing. A few showers coming into the far north. Fog has been a problem across Northern Ireland, and that will thicken up once more through this evening. So do watch out for that. We're also going to see later in the night some fog forming over parts of England and Wales. But for many, it's a fine evening here with clear skies. We are going to see those temperatures tumbling. Still a few showers just coming into the extreme east of England and the far northeast of Scotland, but most will have a dry night. The fog thickening across Northern Ireland and then forming over parts of East Wales, the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast. And quite dense patches of fog are likely, so that could be a problem, particularly for tomorrow morning's rush hour, and we'll see a fairly extensive frost forming as well. So it's a cold start. That fog is going to be dense, should clear from Northern Ireland through the morning as the breeze picks up, but for parts of the Midlands and eastern England, that fog may well linger for a good chunk of the day. Further west, we'll see thickening cloud, a bit of rain coming into Northern Ireland, a few showers for Wales and the southwest, but again, many places dry, but a cold day, particularly if that fog sticks around.
The latest GB News travel. Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. There's long delays on the southbound M1 in Leicestershire at the moment. Junction 22, Ashby de la Zouche, towards Junction 21. 2 lorries there involved in a collision. All the lanes are back open, but still very slow. Long delays too, clockwise M25, just before Waltham Abbey 26. That follows an earlier collision, of course, in the roadworks there as well. A collision being investigated in Dorset. That means the A31 is closed both ways between the Camford Bottom roundabout in Winbourne and the Merley roundabout in Queuing. Flooding in the south of England. Aldershot, the Blackwater Valley route is blocked, as is Aldershot Road in Fairlands, the A323, both for flooding. And if you're heading towards George Best Belfast City Airport, disruptions to flights there. That's due to the poor weather conditions this lunchtime. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Well, there's plenty more coming up on Good Afternoon Britain, but before that, Martin Daubney is up at 3 o'clock. Martin, what's coming up in your show later today?
Well, it's a dark day for Luton, said the Labour Party today. Yeah, it is. And you lot turned the lights out. And so did actually the Conservative Party before that. This slavish adherence to net zero is now making us jobless. It's making us colder. It's making us poorer. When is the light going to come on in the politician's mind to say enough is enough? We are trampling on a manufacturing industry. 6 million pensioners being forced into fuel poverty. And because of what? A few people want to go around hugging trees. This has to end. And today we're going to call time on it. And while we're at it, about 3:30 today, Kemi Badenoch is expected to deliver a surprise speech on immigration. What will she have up her sleeve? After all, record numbers came in under the Conservative Party. Will there be another Damascene conversion? The bill on assisted dying, that might get a wrecking amendment today. I'll be joined in studio by Richard Tice, who thinks any attempt to derail that bill will be a travesty of justice. Also joined by Kate Hoey. Proof we never got Brexit done properly. There will now be dog passports required to take your dogs between Ireland and Northern Ireland, proving there is EU supremacy of law, and that is carnage and disruption, particularly for those who have a guide dog. So a very, very action-packed show coming 3 till 6.
Blimey, looking forward to seeing what on earth Kemi Badenoch will have to say at 3:30. But of course, you're on air from 3, Martin. Look forward to it.
Yes, well, Keir Starmer faced questions from MPs, including Kemi Badenoch, in the House of Commons today. But some of his own backbenchers, the Labour backbenchers, urged him to introduce blasphemy laws. Let's have a listen to this.
November marks Islamophobia Awareness Month. Last year, the United Nations Human Rights Council adopted a resolution condemning the desecration of religious texts, including the Quran, despite opposition from the previous government. Acts of such mindless desecration only serve to fuel division and hatred within our society. Will the Prime Minister commit to introducing measures to prohibit the desecration of all religious texts and the prophets of the Abrahamic religions?
Can I agree with him that desecration is awful and I think should be condemned across the House? We are, as I said before, Mr. Speaker, committed to tackling all forms of hatred and division, including, of course, Islamophobia in all of its forms.
Well, very interesting for UK MPs, British MPs in British parliaments that has an international reputation for freedom of speech and religion. We can argue about whether that's under threat, but the MPs would seek to create an offence of destroying a book.
And that was Tahir Ali, the Labour MP, speaking there. Earlier, Imran Hussain asked a similar question, demanding a definition of Islamophobia be brought forward. And we all know what would happen under a definition of Islamophobia. Suddenly it would be, easily
an offence to
criticise Islam. Which we don't do to religions. Feel free to criticise my lack of faith. Feel free to criticise. I mean, could you imagine if we had if we had this sort of law? I mean, could you imagine the lack of progress in the world if people hadn't been able to challenge or even mock or even receive challenge themselves?
Right. And interesting that, Lee, that he spoke about the Abrahamic faiths, so Islam, Christianity and Judaism, but you don't see any Jews or Christians calling for laws to stop their holy texts being desecrated. So very concerning. Anyway, to discuss...
But also, why not any protections for Hindus?
Indeed, or any holy books. So, yes, very questionable.
Well, Chris Hope, our political editor, is with us now. Chris, I think that was an incredibly mealy-mouthed response from Keir Starmer then, but of course, this is a difficult tightrope he has to walk electorally.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we're currently in Islamophobia month, and that question from Tahir Ali asked the PM whether he would commit to introducing measures to prohibit the desecration of all religious texts and the prophets of the Abrahamic religions. That's Judaism, Christianity and Islam. Now, we heard from the PM, he didn't say no to that question. He said that desecration is awful and should be condemned across the House. We are committed to tackling all forms of hatred and division, including, of course, Islamophobia in all its forms. Now, in England and Wales abolished the blasphemous and libel laws related to that area in 2008. Scotland in 2024. 79 countries have what are called blasphemy laws, but in a sense, I think that most people think we've moved on from the idea of protecting a religious text legally in the way that it's described there. So whether Sir Keir Starmer wasn't ready for the question, didn't feel able to rule it out. We know that they want to look at the definition of Islamophobia, and that could be brought into the way government does its work. That, of course, is a contested space, and the Tories wrestled with that for many years when they were in power. That may come up again. Maybe he's being sensitive to that. I've gone to number 10. This issue was not raised by any journalists in the briefing with the PM spokesman and his press secretary after PMQ. So currently there's a slight mystery about why the PM wasn't much firmer on that, and we'll try and get to the bottom of that for you over the next few days.
Because one would assume, given that they were Labour MPs, that the Prime Minister did have warning of the question they were going to ask in order to prepare it. But, Chris, a lot of people are worried about increasing sectarianism in British politics, and, of course, there's a lot of that at the election. Do you think that is an example today of increasing sectarianism, the fact that MPs are playing to particular demographics rather than their constituency as a whole or the common good of the whole of the UK?
Yeah, Miriam, on your first point, he did appear to read out his answer, which suggests he wasn't caught by surprise. It was a Labour MP asking it, and often, as we know, and you know as a former MP, often MPs are tipped off if it's a question they want a decent answer on. Yeah, the issue of sectarianism is an issue raised by Nigel Farage in the summer after those riots following the Southport attacks. I think what was meant to be happening in our country, we're trying to separate out politics from religion, certainly on the issue of blasphemy laws, and I think any movement back towards that will be seen as a curtailment on freedom of speech. We debate all religions without free or further in this country, and to reverse that, I think, would be seen by many as a backward step. But of course, the Labour Party do have issues there. They've got to make sure they've got a large Muslim vote. They want to make sure and Islamophobia is a big issue for the Muslim community. So it's quite a narrow line upon which Sir Keir Starmer is walking.
Keir Starmer was one of the most senior lawyers in the country for many years. He was someone who prided himself on his human rights work. I find it astonishing that he wouldn't make a more full-throttled defence of the liberties that we all enjoy, and wouldn't take the opportunity to sort of tell the House that we're not going to backslide on those liberties. I mean, Chris, am I wrong to think that if there was some curmudgeonly Christian conservative who stood up and said, we need a law to imprison people who speak ill of Jesus Christ or desecrate the Bible, that perhaps we would have heard a more full-throttled defence of freedom of speech and freedom of action from our Prime Minister?
Yeah, we won't know, Tom Wilby, until we ask the Prime Minister ourselves for GB News, but that might be the case. I mean, I think if you flip that question around, I mean, the Muslim community does feel as though it gets a hard time. Islamophobia is an issue for members of that community. Many Labour MPs represent Muslim areas, and it was an issue, of course, at the last election when the issue, the war in Gaza came up. So I think it's slightly different because, of course, Christianity is a majority religion in this country. But yeah, you may have had a different answer had the question been reversed. If Danny Kruger, well-known Christian in the Commons, had asked a similar question, you may have got a different answer. We don't know. But I think I can only sense from this, and again, we're trying to find out from Downing Street what he meant by that answer. He was trying to tread a very delicate path in Islamophobia month. But I think what we are watching here as reporters in Westminster is that definition of Islamophobia, because that could become a real chilling effect on debating this whole area of policy.
Indeed. Well, Chris Hope, thank you very much for your insight there. I mean, this is hugely concerning that a Prime Minister is so worried potentially about the votes of a particular group of people that he won't categorically stand up for something that is seen as a vital part of our British heritage and tradition.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, it really, well, we will continue to pursue this one on GB News. But coming up, the very latest on Storm Connell, which has wreaked havoc across the country overnight. Is the coast now clear? Find out after this.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player app. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This week is Chocolate Week, the ultimate celebration of everything rich, sweet and indulgent.
Yes, and we now have the best person in the studio with us to satisfy all of your chocolate cravings. We're joined now by master chocolatier Ollie the Choc. Ollie,
hello.
Really
Hey,
good to see you this morning.
Thank you for having me.
And you brought some of your chocolate in with you.
I did. I brought some tasting samples. You're very welcome to help yourself.
So what have you got here? Tell us.
So this is my signature chocolate. I call it the Holy Grail. It's got sea salt flakes, crushed Oreo, caramel fudge pieces, very Moorish.
I love a caramel and salt combo, just, you know. I feel like you see it everywhere now. Look,
you won't be disappointed.
Look, I want everyone to see a close-up of this one. Can we get a shot on this one? So this is Oreo, there we are, caramel and salt. Do you want to try some?
You go first. Help yourselves. And then this bar of chocolate is a little bit of a wild card. That's a mystery flavour. So
OK, I love a mystery.
I'm not going to tell you what that is.
Hold on this one. This one's amazing.
Are you?
Oreo, caramel.
That's my biggest seller.
I'll keep my palate clean for this. So this is a mystery flavour.
You've got to guess what that is.
Is that a nut in there, I see? Right, here we go. Ready?
I'm not saying anything.
Talk us through.
Very crunchy.
For me, I'm all about textures in chocolate.
Me too.
It has got a good crunch to it, hasn't it? It's not the kind of flavour that you would expect.
Oh, I can't get it.
Is it sweet? Is it salty?
No, it's salty, yeah.
It's salty.
Hang on, bit more.
OK.
Bit more.
I mean, just keep going.
Crisps? Wait,
It is crispy, it's crunchy. Could it be crisps?
I think it could be crisps. Yeah, it's crisps.
So what flavour?
Salt and vinegar. Cheese and onion.
Yes, nailed it. You know.
Oh, you're much better than me.
Love that.
Do you know what? I think I've got a bit of a cold, so my taste buds are
Oh, you're going to blame that, are you?
That's my excuse. That's delicious.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 9 minutes to 3, and another storm, this one called Connell, has brought heavy rain and flooding overnight, which has led to some key rail lines being forced to shut, and passengers are being told not to travel on some parts of the network.
Well, that's as many regions are still left clearing up from Storm Bert. Well, the Met Office has issued yellow weather warnings for rainfall in several areas into this afternoon.
Well, joining us now is weather journalist Nathan Rao. Nathan, another storm. Is this unusual for this time of year or just what's to be expected in late November?
Unfortunately not. No, not so unusual, but you're right. 2 days and 2 storms and 3 storms so far in the season. This coming after Storm Bert at the weekend, which was a particularly nasty storm, lasted quite a while. And what we're seeing at the moment, really with the issue, is going to be the heavy rainfall and the flooding. With Storm Bert, it was a mixture really of heavy rain and winds. But with Storm Connell, that thankfully is going to be moving away from the UK through tonight, it's more of a case of heavy rain on top of the heavy rain that we saw from Storm Bert at the weekend, which already dumped about 6 inches of rain in parts of the country. So any more rain on top of that is going to be unwelcome, especially those parts that are flooded. As you mentioned, Storm Connell is moving away from the country now. The greatest impact is going to be on the Netherlands, in fact. Storm Connell was named by the Dutch Meteorological Society yesterday. That's going to be hitting the Netherlands as we move through tonight. And then thankfully it's turning calmer and a bit more settled, although colder, through the end of the week. So a very, very stormy few days. It's going to leave its impact for a while because the flooding, of course, takes a long time to clean up. The very, very heavy rain over a number of days, it takes, it has a lag effect in terms of the flooding of the worst hit parts of the country are going to be dealing with that now going through the next week or so.
Well, I suppose that's the key. Even though the storm may now have, in its majority, moved on, you had this compounding effect, as you say, from 2 storms, one on top of the other. The storm drains in many parts of the country simply won't be able to handle one after the other. And this could really be causing disruption, not just today, but well into next week.
Yes, you're quite right, Tom. And even though it is looking calmer for the end of the week and into the weekend, however, we seem to be in that territory now where we're the spectre of Christmas floods may be starting to rear its ugly head. In 2020, we had flooding over Christmas in Bedford. In 2013, I think it was 2013, 2014, very, very bad Christmas floods. And that is when we get stuck in this pattern of Atlantic weather systems coming in from the west, which is what Storm Bert did, which is what Storm Connell did. Through the end of the year, heavy rain on top of heavy rain, the drains becoming overwhelmed, the rivers becoming overwhelmed, and then we come to the end of the year when we start looking at parts of the country becoming flooded through the Christmas period. The longer term outlook is sort of flipping between low pressure and high pressure, which means flipping between unsettled and settled. Therefore, there is going to be a risk of further storms as we go through the end of the year, as opposed to when we might get it's called a high pressure blocking pattern that sets a very, very cold settled period over the UK, but without any rain. We're not looking at that. The jet stream is right over us for the next week or so, and that has the potential to bring in more wet and windy weather. So it looks like, even though make the most of the calmer, although it's going to be very, very cold and foggy, in fact, in places over the next couple of days into the weekend, then turning milder, there is going to be a risk, I suspect, of more wet and windy weather and potentially storms.
Nathan, one of the questions that people always ask is this a consequence of climate change? Is the weather more variable, more extreme than it used to be? But leaving that aside, do we also have the problem with how built up some of our towns and cities are now? Lots of people concrete over their gardens. There's fewer and fewer areas of natural drainage. Of course, that doesn't affect the rainfall, but does it affect the impact that the rainfall does have?
Yes, it absolutely does. And there was a reporter a couple of years ago who put it out, I can't quite remember, but suggested that this was the very thing that we should be looking at in terms of the drainage systems that we've already got, especially in urban areas, are already at capacity. So building more housing and urban regions on top and then feeding the water drainage into these drainage systems is leading to problems. There are things that people can do in terms of when they build new residential areas. They're called water gardens, rain gardens that soak the rain in rather than allow it to flood straight off hard surfaces. Even roof gardens, people are being encouraged to plant gardens on their roofs, so that also stops the runoff of rains. So yes, as well as the issue of climate change, which is very, very difficult to pinpoint to one weather event or one small series of weather events, it would be wrong of me to say that the flooding that we're having at the moment and the stormy weather that we're having at the moment is a direct consequence of climate change. But if that were the case, then yes, absolutely, looking at how to mitigate the impact of heavy rain and flooding in the UK, which we are seeing more of. I mean, I've been reporting on the weather for almost 20 years now. I'm doing more reporting on flooding. I am noticing it's becoming more of an issue. Mitigating that by building and putting flood prevention measures in place would certainly be a good idea.
Well, Nathan Rao, as always, thanks so much for joining us there, weather journalist. Appreciate your time.
When I was a parish councillor, so long before I was an MP, we had these flooding issues in north of Sheffield. But we found that once the river had been dredged and various difficulties with the reservoir had been solved, actually we had the same amount of rainfall with far less consequences. It's not just the rainfall, is it? It's about all sorts of other things that can cause the rain not to soak in or to, you know, rivers to get blocked up and things like that.
Yeah, it's not what you have, it's how you manage it.
Absolutely.
But
the Home Office... so many things.
In other news, the Home Office has told GB News it has robust measures in place to manage the risk posed by terrorist offenders released from prison.
Well, this follows the news that a convicted terrorist believed to have groomed the Manchester arena bomber has been freed from jail despite serious concerns that he'll reoffend. Abdel-Rauf Abdallah was released yesterday, less than 2 months after the parole board denied him early release, claiming he still posed a high risk of serious harm to the public.
Well, joining us now to discuss this is our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, because, Mark, a lot of people will be genuinely concerned here.
Yes, and understandably so. Abdel-Rauf Abdallah is enjoying his first full day of freedom now, having been released later yesterday from a prison in East Yorkshire. He'd been jailed in 2016 for encouraging and funding a number of extremists to go over and fight for the extremist terrorist group ISIS across in Syria and Iraq. He was jailed for 9.5 years. The prison term was 5.5 years. He ended up actually serving pretty much the full sentence as handed down by the judge, because when he was released, get this, in 2021, he went on to reoffend, making threats to an individual, and he was then recalled to prison to serve out the remainder of his sentence. Now, towards the end of his prison term, the last couple of months, he went up before the parole board asking to be considered for early release. But their assessment of him was that he poses a significant risk to the public, a risk that he may well reoffend, that he may well groom and radicalise others, because this is the man, according to the Manchester Arena inquiry report, who groomed and radicalised Salman Abedi, the bomber who carried out that devastating attack on that Ariana Grande concert back in 2017. So some real concern about his potential for reoffending. That's why there will be restrictions on what he can get up to when he's out. The type of restrictions we can expect probably are limited, if not complete, denied access to the internet. Phones, perhaps just a landline that the authorities can monitor rather than access to a mobile phone. But, you know, offenders in the past have got round these kind of restrictions.
And I think one of our guests earlier, former head of counter-terrorism, said that Abdallah is actually a paraplegic following injury in, I think, the Libyan war. So he's not independently mobile. But nevertheless, even in prison, he was able to communicate with the Manchester arena bomber and probably many others that we don't know about. So how effective are these measures? How do terrorists get round them? How do they get access to technology when it's prevented by law?
Yeah, just by being sneaky, basically, and, you know, getting others, friends and family, perhaps, to buy them a burner phone, that kind of thing. You know, some of them will be on electronic tags, but if you're not on an electronic tag, you might not be subject to the same type of very stringent requirements that some of the most at-risk individuals are. I mean, the real difficulty is if you really are considered to be a genuine and significant and, very real threat to the public in terms of maybe going out and carrying out another attack, then you would be placed under probably 24-hour surveillance. But that is very manpower intensive. You require significantly large teams of people to monitor these individuals around the clock. And there's only so many resources that the police and the security services, who are already managing many, many live terrorist investigations, can devote to just looking after prisoners who've been released.
It just seems so frustrating that we are creating more work than we need to for our police forces. As you say, the intense amount of energy and manpower that's needed to surveil someone outside of prison. I mean, it's not beyond the wit of man to sort of just slice through all of these problems that we create for ourselves as a society. If authorities genuinely believe this individual is at risk, I mean, yes, I know due process, yes, I know that the courts have determined a certain year, but I also know that Parliament is sovereign. You could have a one-line bill to lock this man away.
But remember, it was Parliament or certain sections of Parliament who, a couple of decades or more ago, decided that they wanted to do away with just such restriction regime that you're talking about, control orders that was in place. It was specifically designed to look after those individuals and deal with those individuals who had either been released from prison, hadn't been prosecuted because there wasn't yet enough evidence to put before the courts, but to ensure that they were the subject of some fairly severe restrictions on their sort of freedoms. And that was deemed to be against their human rights. And then that was replaced by what they called TPIMs, terrorism prevention measures, but they were sort of a magnitude less in terms of the restrictions afforded.
Is part of this because we transposed the European human rights into our own domestic law in 1997, 1998? I mean, is that what really is rubbing up against a lot of these potential restrictions? Or is it the European Court of Human Rights?
I mean, it's all of the above. I mean, our courts, you know, over the years, because of repeated cases and appeals that have gone through on behalf of terrorist prisoners, have adopted policy that makes it very difficult for very restrictive orders to be placed against individuals that might be seen to be infringing the human rights. I think the real concern here is, and we're not talking in the abstract, I think is what I'm trying to say here. There have been multiple cases of terrorists who've been released from prison after serving their jail terms who've gone on to offend, such as, for instance, Usman Khan, who carried out that terrible terrorist attack at Fishmongers Hall on London Bridge in 2019. Then, a few months after that, you had another terrorist, Sudesh Aman, who carried out a terrorist attack down in Streatham in South London. Those pictures are of London Bridge. That's Streatham now, where Sudesh Aman stabbed two people in the high street, was going on to stab more, but he was shot dead by an armed surveillance team who were actually keeping him under 24-hour surveillance because he'd been just released, and they did have intelligence and concerns that he might go on to reoffend. But even they, you know, with that proper 24-hour round-the-clock surveillance, couldn't stop him just nipping into a store, stealing a knife, running out onto the street and stabbing people. That's how difficult it is to keep proper track of individuals who are determined enough to put their own life at risk to go and harm others.
And Mark, you said earlier on in the programme that this may become an increasing problem because the Al-Qaeda terrorists and the ISIS-era terrorists who were imprisoned at the time are now coming up for release, and this will increasingly be of concern. But has sentencing of terrorists changed? Because if people are locked up with indeterminate sentences, then the parole board can indeed recommend that they refuse to be released from prison, and we can keep track of them. So has sentencing changed in response to some of these?
Well, sentencing has changed, and you're right to mention indeterminate sentences that were brought in under the last Labour government precisely to deal with people who may have been convicted of a crime in itself that might not warrant a life sentence, but they know, the authorities, that that individual is far more dangerous, that it's one of multiple offences over a period of time that they've been convicted for. So they can instigate this indeterminate sentence, which means that they can hold on to them for much longer. However, that went through the human rights courts and they deemed that as being an infringement of their human rights. So indeterminate sentences, although we've still got people in prison on those sentences, and eventually they'll all be released. But no new people go on these IPPR, they call them.
Yeah, phased out. Well, Mark, do stay with us, but we're going to check in with our very latest headlines now with Sophia Wensler.
Tom, Miriam, thank you. Good afternoon. These are your headlines from the GB newsroom. Making everything worse, that's the charge from Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch, accusing Sir Keir Starmer of dodging the Chancellor's pledge not to raise taxes or borrow more in the future. In a fiery exchange at Prime Minister's questions, Sir Keir Starmer hit back, saying the leader of the opposition wanted all the benefits of the budget without explaining how she'd pay for it.
2 weeks ago, she stood there and said that she wanted all the investment, all the benefits of the budget, but she didn't know how she was going to pay for it. I noticed that, having come here criticising the national insurance rises over and over again, on Monday she admitted that she wouldn't reverse the position that was set out. Meanwhile, her science minister was saying he was going energetically to do the opposite. They really haven't got a clue what they're doing.
In response to roars from the Labour benches, Kemi Badenoch suggested Sir Keir Starmer should resign over what she described as Labour's lies.
If he wants to know what Conservatives would do, he should resign and find out. Until then, I'm the one asking the questions. There's a petition out there, 2 million people asking him to go. He's the one who doesn't know. He's the one who doesn't know how things work. It is not government that creates growth, Mr. Speaker. It is business.
In other news, roads and railways across the country have been hit by flooding and various stations evacuated as Storm Connell drenched southern England with up to half a month's rain. In London, King's Cross Station was forced to shut due to overcrowding, with commuters describing absolute mayhem at the station. Trains have also been unable to stop at platforms in Euston Underground Station. More than 90 flood warnings are still in place across the UK, including a severe alert for Billing Aquadrome in Northamptonshire, where flooding poses a danger to life. Now, a man from Bradford has been arrested on suspicion of stalking and harassment after videos of women on nights out in Manchester went viral. Greater Manchester Police say the footage shows women being followed, harassed and, in some cases, subjected to upskirting. It's believed to be the first arrest in the UK linked to videos accessible behind paywalls on social media platforms. Officers say the content has caused fear among women in the city, but extra patrols are in place to keep people safe over the festive season. Police are urging anyone affected to contact them. Israel, for the second time since a ceasefire with Hezbollah came into force, says its troops have fired shots in southern Lebanon. It comes as thousands of displaced residents in the south are returning home after 14 months of fighting. However, Israel's warning people not to return until its forces have withdrawn from certain areas, which could take up to 2 months. Here, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer says the ceasefire is long overdue, calling for a political solution to end the crisis permanently. Meanwhile, aid organisations are calling for the truce to extend to Gaza, where fighting continues. And back in the UK, parents in England will soon benefit from 30 minutes of free childcare at the start of the school day as the government rolls out breakfast clubs. Applications are now open for 750 primary schools to join a £7 million trial with free breakfast and childcare starting in April. Chancellor Rachel Reeves has pledged to triple funding for the scheme to over £30 million by 2025, calling it a landmark opportunity to improve attendance, behaviour and family support. Education experts and charities have welcomed the move, but warn it must be properly funded to meet schools' diverse needs. Details of the national rollout are expected after the pilot concludes. Under-Secretary for Education, Stephen Morgan, spoke to us earlier. He says the scheme will break down the barriers to opportunity.
Free breakfast clubs
in every primary school in the country, I believe will make a big difference. We know that it's good for behaviour, it's good for attainment, and it's good for attendance as well. And it also will provide parents' choices around childcare. And we want to do this because we know it will make a big difference to children's lives and make sure that they succeed at school.
Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. It'll be Martin Daubney after the break.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Phil Kearsey is bringing a new flavour to the Michelin-starred restaurant Pied à Terre as it becomes its new executive.